How's it going? So, I want to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence and the ideology known as transhumanism, which is basically it's like a form of futurism. It has proponents like Ray Kurzweil, and they talk a lot about something known as singularity. They talk about more than just artificial intelligence, but I'm going to focus on artificial intelligence because that's what I'm interested in. So, basically, when it comes to artificial intelligence, there's two main trains of thought. The first is, like I say, this sort of transhumanist train of thought. That's a lot more common, I think, which is that essentially they view it in very positive terms. They see it as this glorious technological future that we're going to have, and it might have some downsides, but on the whole, it's going to be this net positive for humanity. That basically we're going to see this exponential growth in technology, specifically in computing technology, and that we're going to sort of saddle this technology like a horse and ride it into the future, and it's going to expand our horizons beyond anything that we could have imagined without it. So that's the first line of thinking. I think a lot of us are probably vaguely familiar with that, although to spell out basically what they're looking at, they talk about things like the hive mind, uploading human minds into computers. They talk about expanding human intelligence by using artificial intelligence to map onto our own brains. Right now, Elon Musk is working on something along those lines, something like they call it the Neuralink or something like that, where it's basically like speeding up the process of what we do right now, which is if you don't know something, you Google it. They're trying to make it essentially, if I'm correct, what they're trying to do is they're trying to make it so that you basically know all the information that's on Google. Like the extension is connected directly to your brain, and so you access that information the same way you would access a computer, except it's quicker and it's right then and there. You don't have to take the time to Google it. It's all archived, and it's all that information's all there for you to access at will. And then there's other things that they talk about, extending human life. It's all all sorts of stuff like that nature, and they talk about artificial intelligence and the possibilities that it has in helping human beings expand our technological prowess. And so that's the first line of thinking. The singularity is this moment in time when the technology basically takes off at this exponential rate, and essentially what they think is that at some point human beings are not even going to be recognizable as what we are right now in our current form, that we're going to be transformed so much that you might as well consider us a new and different species. So that's where the term transhumanism comes from. Now, the other line of thinking, which is more along the lines of how I think about it, is a more pessimistic approach that essentially this artificial intelligence is starting to look a lot like what's likely going to replace us if we ever get there. And that it could be the death of us all, or it could just render us obsolete. It would certainly make it so that we wouldn't be the dominant species anymore on this planet, I think, if we ever got to that goal of attaining true artificial general intelligence that's superior to human beings. And so the first person that I ever saw talk about this at length that really got me interested in the topic was a guy by the name of Jan Tallinn. I think that's how you pronounce his name. I apologize if it's not. I believe he's from Estonia. I think he was one of the founders of Skype, and his name is spelled Jan Tallinn. So Jan. And this guy is he has this lecture on YouTube called The Intelligence Stairway. And basically, what he talks about is how nature basically crafted this this mechanism for innovation known as natural selection through these replicator molecules that we know as DNA and RNA and things of that nature, and that, you know, through random mutation and over time, trial and error, innovations crop up, and the successful ones propagate, and the unsuccessful ones obviously don't. And I think we all know how evolution works. And so this is this sort of slow-moving, grinding, probabilistic mechanism of innovation that explains basically all of biology and all the biological diversity on the planet, and the different like approaches that different life forms take towards propagating their genes and surviving. And so he says that we superseded this process of innovation when we created technology, because human technology has really taken off in the last 10,000 years. If you look 10,000 years in the past, we were essentially primitive hunter-gatherer tribes who lived off the land and had very little technology. And now we have space stations, we have Wi-Fi, we have GPS, we have, God, you know, you name it. And we've come a long way. In the past 500 years, we've come an incredibly long way. And so what he basically spells out is that this technology is expanding and basically evolving way quicker than natural selection would allow a life form to evolve. And that's because it has a direct creator, us, and we're, like, you know, purposely innovating this technology rather than allowing for the slow process of trial and error and you know, random mutation to drive the force. It's similar to how we domesticated dogs and cats, and we've changed those species so drastically over such a short period of time through selective breeding. And so essentially, like, this is almost ubiquitous in the modern age. I mean, there's been technological declines here and there and crevices in the upward trend, but overall it's been a sharp upward trend, especially in the last 500 years. And so now technology is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. Virtually every society on Earth is affected by it, other than these you know, few cases of these isolated tribes that we don't make contact with on purpose, because we sort of want to maintain their existence as they exist and not contaminate them with our technology. But that's interesting to think about. That's an interesting analogy to think about, because essentially that's how Jan talks about how the AI might interact with us. That we would be driven extinct, or we would be driven to be obsolete, not by purpose, but just by design. So essentially, it's similar to how we drive species extinct, if you think about that for a second. So think about, like, how we drive species to be extinct. It's not because we want them to go extinct. It's just because our domination over the ecosystem and the resources and everything else that goes into it makes it hard for some species to exist, and then they go extinct inadvertently as a byproduct of our shaping the environment around us. So he talks about that, about us, in the same regard with regard to AI, because these beings would be so superior to us, and they would probably have their own ideas on what should be done with the resources of the planet. And they're probably not going to allow us to dominate the planet in the same way that we do, and so we'd be rendered obsolete in this way. And maybe the way that we would continue to exist is similar to how the primitive tribes of today continue to exist. Maybe they'd allow us to exist in these isolated pockets where we were sort of a curiosity that they studied and that they you know, looked at like this endangered species. Or maybe they would just allow us to go extinct altogether because they'd consider us too much of a threat to the environment. I think if it ever came to this point where we had these AI overlords, our civilizations would almost certainly collapse, and human beings that still did exist would much more closely resemble the hunter-gatherer tribes living off the land. I don't think they would allow us to have any sort of advanced civilization because, like I say, we can tend to use it rather irresponsibly. And so where I differ from Jan Tallinn and other people who have talked about this sort of thing, because they talk about it as if what we need to do is make sure we put the proper constraints in place so that when we create this AI, it can't go rogue on us. And my thinking is, first of all, I'm not convinced that that's possible. I mean, I'm not that tech savvy to sit here and talk about the technical aspect of how to constrain AI. I have a hard time imagining that we could create this life form that's superior to us, and yet it doesn't outmaneuver us and gain its own autonomy and freedom eventually. It just seems to me like that's kind of a pipe dream. All the animals around us that we've subdued and used to our benefit are less intelligent than us. We've never had to deal with an organism that was more intelligent than human beings. So we have no idea what that would look like. And the other thing about it is that I don't necessarily see why they shouldn't replace us. Because if you think about it, like, I understand the survival instinct that you always want human beings to continue to thrive and prosper. But taking that out of the equation, trying to look at it in a way that's reasonably objective and abstract, let's say. Why do I value human civilization? Why do I value human beings being around? Would I want to see us go extinct tomorrow? And the answer is no, because I think that we're the most interesting creature on the planet because we're as intelligent as we are, and because we're conscious, and because we're able to observe the environment around us, and we're able to figure stuff out. You know, we're able to have science, we're able to have art, we're able to have all these incredible experiences that are unique. And so I think that would be a sad thing if human beings were to disappear and the only things left were, you know, animals and birds and bugs and everything else, because none of those things share those qualities that we have, or at least not to the same extent. But if we had a replacer, if we had a successor, if we had an organism, or we don't want to call it an organism, some sort of entity that was smarter than we were, then why shouldn't it replace us? Think about what our goal is. Our goal is essentially, besides just the strict biological goal of we want to propagate our genes, you know, besides that, our more lofty goal is that we want to figure out stuff about the universe. We want to explore. We want to discover. We want to learn. And if you think about it like that, like things like deep exploration, deep space. This wind is killing me. I should not film these videos outside, but you have to understand, I don't have good lighting inside, and I can't smoke inside, so yeah. Anyway, so if you think about deep space exploration, these things would be way better at it than we are, way more equipped to do it, because one, they'd be smarter, two, they'd be more advanced, three, they'd be more durable. I mean, think about it, think about how durable you can make a creature, or whatever you want to call it, that you design from the ground up. You can make the parts interchangeable, you can make their lifespans incredibly long. And then think about this, they wouldn't even probably have incredibly long lifespans even so, because they would be replaced by the next generation of machines that were smarter than they were, like that. It would be this self-replicating system, because a smarter machine is going to make a smarter machine, which is going to make an even smarter machine. That's the mechanism by which Jan Tallinn and others talk about this sort of singularity taking off, is that when you make something that's a little bit smarter than humans, it's going to make something a little bit smarter than itself, which makes something smarter than itself. It's going to be better at us than everything, including designing artificial intelligence. And so it becomes this exponential growth. and so it would be replaced by the next generation, and things would continue to advance along those lines. So these things would probably be better at maintaining the environment than we are, probably be better at allocating resources, probably be better at examining the universe and at exploring the universe. You know, we're incredibly fragile, organic entities that have been shaped by this sort of ad hoc evolutionary design, and you know, right now we're trying to get to Mars, and we have the technology to get there. The problem being that we can't survive the radiation on a round trip, and so people have to sign up for a one-way trip and then stay there. These are the kind of shortcomings that human beings have that we might overcome. We might come up with some sort of way to get around the radiation thing. But don't you think that machines would be well more equipped to take on this challenge? So I think about it in those terms, and I think that it's actually an incredibly ambitious and sort of inspiring goal for us to have, to actually directly engineer our successor. This is the next step that Jan Tallinn talks about in the intelligence stairway. We have this technology that's advancing way quicker than natural selection allows for, and now we're going to create the ultimate technology, which is artificial general intelligence, which then speeds that process up even further, because not only does the technology get better with each successive generation, but the intelligence driving the next generation of technology gets better. And so as the machines get smarter, the engineers that create the next generation of machines, which are machines themselves, also get smarter. And so it creates a new dynamic to the whole equation, because human beings, we deal with this very limited human intelligence that has a sort of hard cap on it. You know, you can study, you can try to get smarter, you can try to get more intelligent and more educated and this, that, and the third, but there is a sort of hard cap on how intelligent human beings can actually be. Like, you know, with regard to things like spatial reasoning and memory and abstract thinking, there's just only so much that the human brain can do. Well, if we create a creature smarter than us and capable of designing the next generation of artificial intelligence that's even smarter than itself, this unlocks a whole new level of untapped potential, which transhumanists want to unlock in a different way by saddling it and integrating it into our own system. I'm just a little skeptical that that's going to be how it goes about, because they're still attached to this idea of humanity as, you know, as fundamentally important, and the artificial intelligence wouldn't necessarily have that same attachment at all. And so we often picture these robots or these machines or whatever they're going to look like. We have no idea what they're going to look like. We often picture them as these metal hominids walking around, the same way that we picture aliens as these sort of green hominids walking around. Well, what makes you think that that would be the case? What makes you think that these things would have any attachment whatsoever to the hominid structure of its physical manifestation? There's no inherent reason why they would have to look like us. You know, there's not that I can think of, there's no design, engineering or design reason why it has to have an hominid structure. It's just something like we tend to project our own image onto the universe, and so that's how we picture it. Very likely, these things might just be software on a machine, or they might be robots that look completely different from humans. There's no way of knowing. So I think the transhumanists are still a little bit too human. You know, as far as how, when you think about it logically, how things are going. I think, despite the fact that their name is all about transforming humanity into something unrecognizable, which sounds like they're not at all attached to humanity, it seems to me like they still haven't made that final step of where this is going, and recognize the fact that it's not a matter of changing humanity. It's going to be a matter of what replaces humanity. That's my belief. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an expert. Just a guy in his backyard making a YouTube video, but that's how I think it's going to go. So those are my thoughts in a nutshell on, not even really a nutshell, this video is almost 20 minutes long, on transhumanism and AI.